tactics and the matchups and stuff like that. People, as always, get your comments in. We love to get them in. But I might just bring up the potential teams for the final. They may or may not be. I mean, this is based on the league semi-finals and the fact that you would imagine that that Aidan McCarthy is going to start after that performance. Maybe Mark Rodgers would be right, maybe not. But I'm just wondering what, like, if number one, if you're Kilkenny, you know John Conlon's going to be centre back. Do you put someone like John Donnelly in there to try and win ball off him to scrap for ball? Do you put Billy Ryan? Do you put him in centre forward and hope to run at him? Adrian Mullen to kind of drift off him and get scores. Conor Cleary against TJ Reid, we'll imagine that would probably happen if Reid is playing full forward. Does he follow him out to centre forward, or is it Conlon against TJ Reid? And then even if you look at the half forwards for Clare, for whatever reason, David Fitzgerald always plays wing forward, but always wears number 8, and Cathal Malone midfield always wears 10. But anyway, that seems to be the case. But would it be Richie Reid or somebody against Fitzgerald? Blanchfield against Duggan? You know, what way do you see this working out?
I would have said that Blanchfield would match up reasonably well with Fitzgerald, even I'd say Dave Fitzgerald, because of by virtue of the amount of years he's played at Intercounty, is obviously probably maybe a stronger beast than David Blanchfield. But I do think they'd match up reasonably well athletically, and he'd be one of the few maybe that would be able to stay with him. Potentially, could Shane Murphy go out to wing back, maybe to pick up Peter Duggan? I just don't see that. I don't see either the two half forwards necessarily suiting Richie Reid. And I think Richie Reid is a brilliant ball player. I don't think he's an unbelievable marker. So that's why I think the matchups will be particularly interesting from that point of view. Like who's Hugh Lawler going to pick up? Because
you know what? Could it potentially be more like this? Now, I think Duggan has this nice, really good talent for catching the ball with his right hand as well. Something that Danny Sutcliffe is the only other one I can think of off the top of my head that's good at actually going up with both hands. So I think Blanchfield being a left-hander, that might actually make it a little bit more difficult for Duggan. Maybe Deegan would go over on Fitzgerald. I don't know if, well, nobody really has the pedals to go with David Fitzgerald, but maybe physically, even just under the puck out, he might match up okay there. And then Richie Reid, potentially against Rodgers. Other than changing actually the starting team, I'm not really entirely sure what other way you'd go with the matchups if you were to just rejig the half-back line alone and not, like, because Shane Murphy has been quite good. Like, he was very good against Casey before Casey got sent off the last day, following the travelling corner forward. So maybe he'll do that job on a Reedy or a McCarthy. And then Lawler on Galvin, it's quite a, it's a size mismatch. I mean, obviously in terms of like 50-50 ball hit into the air, obviously it's good for Lawler, but low ball, you'd imagine, would favour Galvin. And then Tommy Walsh against McCarthy, maybe that would happen, or maybe he'd swap on to Galvin. Like, there's a lot to sort of figure out there if you're Brian Lohan.
There is a fair bit to figure out. I'd say even just knowing from even Brian Cody's time and even, the early stages of Derek's time as well, Kilkenny probably won't change too much. And they won't change 3 or 6. I wouldn't think anyway. Maybe they will. But I don't think Mark Rodgers necessarily on Richie Reid is necessarily a good matchup for Kilkenny either. Do you know what I mean? Because Rodgers will drift and he'll go back very far, and Richie Reid is obviously going to want to hold that area there around the 45. There's a good few matchups there where you're not sure who's going to pick up who. But then you look at it from a Clare point of view and you're thinking, like, I'd say Adam Hogan's a certainty to be on Owen Cody. To me, Hogan is one of the most annoying man markers in the game, and I mean that with the highest of praise. And he's able to even develop his game where he can kind of hurt lads on the front foot now as well going forward. He's able to deliver that kind of stick pass that can be put over the bar. He's able to even put over a chance himself if he ends up out the pitch. So that's kind of one guaranteed matchup. Think about Conor Cleary and TJ Reid. If TJ plays a 14, I think that's probably a good matchup for Clare and a good matchup for Cleary. But like, TJ was under nearly every puck out that Owen Murphy put down the last day. So he might be in a full forward at different stages, but I'd still expect him to be out in the half line for the vast majority. It's kind of funny. I was chatting Jackie Tyrrell about this yesterday, just for a piece in the paper on Saturday. Like, TJ is 36 and a half, is he? He's 37 in November, I think. It's mad to think that he's still generally always operating in around the engine room. Like, he's generally operating around that middle 8 the whole time. And I actually thought it was kind of interesting. He chased back after Cottle O'Neill the last day,
Mm.
and Cottle O'Neill got the initial step on him, but he wasn't losing ground on him. He
Yeah,
definitely
yeah, yeah.
was. And he had the hurl in and was about a couple of inches away probably from getting a hook in on him as well. So it's amazing to think that. And I said it to Jackie as well. Did you ever think, like, when he came in 2008, that this fella would still be around now? And he said, to be honest with you, I didn't even know if he'd be on the panel in a couple of years because of his lack of work rate at the time. And now all of a sudden, what's his greatest strength is probably that, and he's injury-free at the minute. I remember seeing him in club games at Ballyhale where he maybe wouldn't chase as much, and it was kind of, I'd say, predicated by the fact that he was carrying something. But he looks to have a fairly clean bill of health at the minute, and I'd expect him to be at the edge of the square sometimes, but I would largely expect him to be out in the half-forward line, and that creates a little bit of a conundrum for Clare as well.
And, when people talk about, you keep hearing about, you need a good culture in the dressing room. Well, a good culture probably starts when your best player is willing to work unbelievably hard. And then so is Owen Cody, and so is Adrian Mullen, and Richie Reid works hard. So they've actually got players, like, it's no surprise that, allied to the fact that they've got huge talent, that the work rate's really, really, really strong, that they continue to be a really successful club. Generation after generation, they've unbelievably hard-working players. And then it's just the talent that tops it off.
Well, if you're Derek Ling, Shane, and you could just say, like, what do I expect from Harry Shine or Billy Drennan or whoever it is, any of these young Kilkenny lads coming in? And like, as Jackie said it to me, he said, surely he just points at TJ and says, this is what we need you to do. This is our best player, and he's breaking his arse for every ball, from the first second to the last second. So it's a great example. And listen, he got that example probably from Henry as well, who probably picked it up from somebody else. So, but it is a great example to set when your best player is the one that's probably working the hardest. You'd imagine it sets a fairly good culture, as you say, for the group.
Yeah, Traumspieler says that Rogers was concussed badly versus Tip and had to go off. I'd rather Rogers sit the league final out to be raring to go against Limerick instead. Richard Hogan suggests Shane Murphy probably on McCarthy in the full back line, more physical than Tommy Walsh. And Tommy's fairly physical at the same time. Surely Keown will start ahead of Hogan. Now, the reason that I'd say to give Hogan another go is, like, they've had a really good look at him in the league since he returned from duty from O'Loughlin Gales. And they already know what Mossy Keown is going to give them. So let's find out what Luke Hogan can do in a league final. That's why I'd be thinking maybe he'll get the start here.
Yeah, I also think Mossy's a very dangerous player to be bringing in when defences are starting to tire as well, with that kind of pace he has and that style he has. Listen, there could be changes before throwing, but I'd say Derek Ling will largely go with this, or named anyway, will largely go with the same team as the last day. Could there be 2 or 3 changes before throwing? Potentially. But like, on your point, I think he knows what he's going to get from Mossy Keown. This is another test for Luke Hogan, who, outside of deflecting goal on the rebound the last day, was probably quiet enough. So this is another chance for Ling to see, okay, is this that a really viable option come summertime?
Yeah, okay. Comments, Richard Hogan, interesting to see if they'll use Luke Hogan on Conor Cleary. Has done well so far and will cause a few problems. Obviously, his confidence has got to be up getting that goal against Limerick the last day. Adrian McGrath, Hogan is clearly very friendly and engaging. He seems to have long chats with his man. Maybe ask Reedy if Cody should study dairy farming teaching or some other such subject for the chat.
I'd say there's a fair bit. There's dripping with sarcasm.
Yeah. Well, look, you get your comments in when we get our guests on the show today. Then I'm just wondering again, like, Cian Kenny and Jordan Malloy did very well in midfield against Cian Lynch and William O'Donoghue. Now, they're probably against a more combative type midfield here with Darrell Owen and Cathal Malone. Now, both lads are very good hurlers, but you would be thinking that Kenny and Malloy, quickness along the ground, like sharp turns, they're smaller players, very nifty players, and rely on their skills as well. So it's 2 fairly different types of midfielders, speed and maybe swiftness versus a bit more physicality.
Yeah, I'd be expecting Cathal Malone to really try and stamp his presence on the game as he normally does. He's just a very no-nonsense kind of player, isn't he? Like, and he's well able to, like, he's as accomplished as anybody at taking a score from distance now, but he's a very, very physical player. And I know the 2 Kilkenny boys adapted very well to the physical challenge that Limerick threw at them in the middle of the field last day, particularly Kenny on O'Donoghue at different stages. But this is kind of a different game, different setup. Malone's role will be interesting. I'll put it this way. I think if Malone has an 8 out of 10, I'd say Clare would be hard enough beaten. But if the two Kilkenny boys are, if the two Kilkenny boys kind of dominate is probably not the right word, but if they get the upper hand in the middle of the field like they did the last day, that's an area that Kilkenny have struggled in. And it'd be interesting to see where Conor Fogarty comes back into the mix when he's fit. Might feature maybe at the weekend. Will they go with that one experienced soldier and maybe a more physical player along with Malloy or along with Kenny, or will they stick with the two kind of raw enough lads middle of the field? That'd be very, very interesting to see, because it is somewhere they've struggled in recent times.
If you're, and like, we're not going to ask Adrian Mullen too many game specific things, because obviously,
no, we'll ask him what the team is going to be and
yeah,
where's he
okay,
going to be playing and who he's picking up.
But like, would you, if you're Brian Lohan, do you want Brian or do you want Diarmuid Ryan following him out the field, because Diarmuid Ryan is very good at driving lads the other way, or Keane Gavin, who maybe, you know, you can see the potential that he can drive players the other way, and there probably is a score in him also. Like, you definitely want Conlon holding centre back. But if I'm probably Derek Ling here, I'm thinking, well, look, if you put Mullen wing forward, Clare are certainly going to have someone following him out the field. Whereas if he's put centre forward on Conlon definitely needs to hold. So now I've got a conundrum where I either let Mullen go off free, or I have to almost detail someone to man mark him, which takes away something from somewhere else on the pitch.
Yeah, and listen, these are all the things that the managers go through and thinking, how can we upset Conlon's such a big player for Clare? How can we upset him? How can we make him start thinking about maybe something other than his defensive duties? You know, like he wants to kind of sit back in that pocket and defending around the D. Whereas if you put Mullen in centre forward, either Conlon has to drift out a small bit, or somebody else is going to have to pick him up. If somebody else has to pick him up, then you're hoping that there's maybe a bit more space for one of their midfielders or a half forward to manoeuvre in, if they've just detailed someone specifically on Mullen. You mentioned about Diarmuid Ryan there. I don't know if Diarmuid Ryan picking up Adrian Mullen is I don't see Diarmuid Ryan as much of a marker. I think he's your classic kind of wing back that does a lot of hurling, but maybe his man could do a decent bit of hurling as well. Do you know what I mean? And he's obviously capable of scoring from distance. But I wouldn't see him as being one that would be maybe detailed to man mark. Keane Galvin probably more so, I'd say.
Do you know, I'd see, and I know what you're saying, because like, I think Diarmuid Ryan is good at driving forward with the ball from deep areas. Now, you know how I feel about people shooting from 100 yards too regularly, but leaving that aside, I think he's got the athleticism to get up and down all day. Like, Mullen's obviously an excellent forward and can make a fool out of most lads, but it's not like the man marking in the sense of you're in, let's say, isolating the full back line. You've got someone who's going over and back those short little movements all the time. When you're marking somebody a little bit further out the field, it's a very different type of man marking, and it's just, do you have the legs to stay with this lad? And when you get on the ball in the front foot, you can do damage going the other way. That's how I'd see it working.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It is totally different man marking someone in around that middle third than it is to playing corner back marking a corner forward, or full back marking a full forward or something like that. It's totally different, yeah. And there's actually they can get on the ball in so many different ways in around that middle third as well. They can take it from the defence, they can take it from their own forwards, it can be recycled backwards. But the one thing you mentioned there, you will get on the ball. You should get on the ball if you're playing that role, but you have to be able to do damage with the ball. In fairness, Diarmuid Ryan, if he was playing that type of role, if he's in possession, he's definitely going to do a bit of damage with it.